Happy Blue Wave and good morning, Jill Weinbanks.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good.
Good.
However, this is not only distressing, but news of their panic, right? That apparently Don Jr. and Breitbart, is it? And I think Russian TV reporting what they believe to be the name of the whistleblower.
Boy, I should have woken up earlier so that I would have known the name.
Ah,
I don't want to know the name.
Yeah.
Nobody should want to know the name
yeah.
for many reasons. One is it's illegal to have disclosed it. And
Well,
two,
right. That's my first question.
name is
Doesn't that
irrelevant.
put Don Jr. in legal jeopardy?
It seems to me that it is a criminal offense to do that for sure.
But this administration has done many illegal things, but hasn't been called to account for it.
Well, this one is not a government employee.
No,
He has
yeah.
no immunity, no protection. He somehow got the information. Heaven only knows how. There could not be any legitimate way that he could have gotten that information. That means that someone else is involved in a crime because someone who knew the name gave it to him.
Ironically,
And
it
now we're
could be the
assuming
Russians,
it's the
right?
Name. It could be the Russians.
Right.
It could be the Russians. It could be anything. And we don't even know that it's the right name. But I just want to point out how irrelevant the name of the person
Yes.
is.
Thank
Right.
you. Just going to ask.
Doesn't
that.
matter. Santa Claus.
It's ridiculous. I mean, we have total corroboration of everything in the whistleblower. We have much more direct evidence than the whistleblower provided. The whistleblower was like, I was walking by and I saw a fire, and I called 911
Right.
to report it.
Yep.
And the fire department gets there and they put out the fire. It doesn't matter who called it in. There was a fire. And I think that's where we're at here. We have a clear violation of the laws of America, and it doesn't matter who reported it first. They're
Yep.
corroborated by people with direct evidence.
Yesterday was an extraordinarily bad day for Donald Trump. The Sondland testimony, first of all, you had said, reminds me of Nixon advice to say, I don't remember, I don't recall. Even when you
Right.
do, that's perjury. Now recalling that you lied doesn't mean you didn't lie the first time. So what kind of trouble, how significant was the Sondland testimony, and what kind of trouble might he still be in?
Well, I think that the chances of his being prosecuted for the original perjury, now that he's come clean, are probably, it's a sideshow,
Yeah.
so to speak. It doesn't mean he didn't lie. It doesn't mean that he didn't commit perjury. But it means now the evidence is clear. I keep likening it to a jigsaw puzzle. And, sorry. hold
You
on.
got
Oh, my God.
corgis barking at your
Virginia.
house?
That's
Virginia's
got
calling.
amazing.
MSNBC
Oh.
calling?
I
As
say?
Virginia.
Sorry, I'm going to go in a quieter room.
Okay.
No, I mean, I just think everything is fitting together like a jigsaw, and we should just pay attention to all the pieces. People should be reading the testimony. I know it's a lot to ask when you have, hundreds and hundreds, actually by now thousands of pages released. No one is going to really sit down and read them. But if you're paying attention to the headlines, and you pointed out one big one, which is Sondland walked back his denial that there was a quid pro quo and said, yeah, I now remember. My memories were fresh, and I remember that I personally delivered the message that they wouldn't get the aid unless they did the investigation.
Yeah.
I mean, how much clearer could it be? He admits that he communicated that directly. So we have the quid pro quo, even though a quid pro quo isn't necessary, and even though in foreign relations and in life's relationships, you negotiate with people. I give you something and you give me something. But that's of equal value. It's not, I will give you what the Congress has approved and to which you are entitled if you give me something of personal value to me.
Well, yeah, Jill, can settle a Stephanie Miller Show debate from this morning. So in terms legally, because our friend Glenn Kirshner said, may we never use the confusing, imprecise term quid pro quo to describe Trump's dirty Ukrainian deal. Let's call it what it is, a bribe, as in treason, bribery, or other high crimes or misdemeanors. One more tweet from SV. Everyone keeps calling it a quid pro quo, but the federal code already has a term for it, extortion. Yes, that's a crime punishable by up to 20 years in prison. Is this bribery or extortion or one or both?
It's
And what's the
probably
difference legally?
both. It's very interesting. Extortion in normal language means a threat of violence. I will kill you if you don't do something. But under the Hobbs Act, Section 1951 of the Criminal Code of America, it is under color of law. So if you use your power as president, you are acting under color of law. You don't have to threaten violence. You just have to make something clear that if you don't do something, you don't get something. So to me, this would be a clear Hobbs Act violation. Hobbs Act was passed for organized crime and labor racketeering, but now it needs to be used for the White House.
So,
in the same way that RICO, Racketeer Influenced Corrupt Organizations, need to be used.
So then legally, is that, I'm sorry, does the Hobbs Act, does that mean extortion or bribery or both?
Because the Hobbs Act would be extortion, but it could also be bribery. And bribery is where I'm paying you to do something. I'm bribing you. I'm going to bribe you to do this favor for me by giving you what the Congress already approved. But that's still bribery. I think that people need to understand that there was no criminal code when the Constitution was passed. There was no Title 18 U.S. Criminal Code. And when they used words, they were using them liberally as people would use in common language. High crime meant something that was really a threat to America, something terrible, but it wasn't defined as a felony under the criminal code because there was no criminal code.
Right.
And so it can be anything that Congress thinks it is, and I think it's time for the Republicans to stop burying their head in the sand and to realize, and you just played the thing about this is great for me that Kentucky is going to go right to McConnell. Excuse me, but what happened to the facts?
Well, yeah, and you tweeted yesterday, I believe evidence will change a lot of minds and votes just like it did in Watergate.
Yeah.
But here's Mitch McConnell yesterday before this, vote last night.
This issue is still in the House. They've only just last week voted to take it up. And I thought it was noteworthy that not a single Republican voted to open this inquiry in the House. But for myself, I'm not going to start commenting on all of these episodes that occur on a daily basis that are unfolding over in the House, but to say that it seems to me they still are not providing the same kind of basic due process rights that were provided both Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton.
Gee, I wonder if someone might know something about that. Jill?
Lies. Those are lies. Yeah. That is not an accurate statement. And I think, as you know, I tried starting a say this, not that. So I agree with Glenn. We should not be saying anything about quid pro quo because no one knows what it means. And we should say shakedown, bribery, extortion. That's what we have here. We have abuse of power. Those are things people understand and that apply here. And for McConnell to say that due process hasn't been afforded is nonsense. Due process has been afforded, more even than Richard Nixon had, although he had a perfectly fair and just process,
right,
and will continue to have a fair and just process. So I mean, for people who are listening to that and aren't hearing the counterpoint, it's really sad because they may believe that, but it simply isn't true.
Yep.
And what they need to be paying attention to is, okay, what is the evidence? What are the facts? What are witnesses actually saying? And now they can read for themselves and see in print exactly what was said. I mean, all you have to read is the very short memorandum of the conversation that happened between Zelensky and the president.
Yeah.
And it says, I need a favor, though. That's in exchange for doing what America wants. I'm going to demand that you do a crazy, goofy thing, which is to make up something about Biden and his son, to make up something about this crazy theory that somehow the machine, the hardware of the hacked emails is in Ukraine.
Oh,
that really, it's one thing for Ukraine to be accused of doing it, which there's no evidence of, and which is firmly established by all of our intelligence sources and by the Mueller report that it was the Russians.
Yeah,
but
and the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee.
Exactly. Yes, I forgot to mention them. You are absolutely right. But even assuming that you could ignore all that, you don't hack by physically removing a server.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
that were true, the server would be missing and somebody would
I
know
know.
it was gone.
Yes.
That's not what happened.
There's no
It
missing
was an
server.
electronic break-in from overseas.
Yep.
That's as simple as it is.
Jill, you tweeted it's totally unnecessary about the whistleblower. This is why they're panicking this morning, I think, after the vote and Sondland's testimony. You said totally unnecessary. Trump provided the best evidence, the memo of the call. No need for hearsay from the whistleblower. Everything he said is corroborated by a long list of firsthand witnesses. So I want to ask you about the latest, because they keep screaming about process. So then, Democrats hold a vote, as you say, the process even more fair than than Nixon or Clinton got. But now the Justice Department says White House witnesses must be allowed to bring lawyers to impeachment inquiry depositions. They must be able to bring a government lawyer. So as I understand it, witnesses are not permitted to bring lawyers into criminal grand juries, and federal courts have generally not allowed executive privilege to stand in the way of criminal investigators.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just a new rule they're making up, right?
Yeah, they're making up whatever will help their point of view, and none of it has any legal basis. And let's not forget how bad a week it's been in terms of the courts. The courts have said, no, your argument is nonsense, and Mazars has to turn over your tax returns for the last 8 years. It's headed straight for the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court had any independence, has any integrity, they will clearly uphold that decision.
Yeah. Well,
a narrow decision, but they could even go further. But even upholding that sort of puts the lie to all of his silly arguments that he cannot be investigated.
Thank you. I was just going to say, good week for the rule of law, Jill. And your friend Lawrence Tribe said, just as predicted, Trump's position in this case was doubly defective, improper invocation of federal judicial power to derail a state proceeding, and a crazy theory that sitting presidents can't be criminally investigated. A good week for the rule of law so far, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will predict that there will be rulings that McGahn must testify, that Cooperman must testify, or is that how you pronounce it? Kupperman.
Kupperman, right. Mm-hmm.
Kupperman has to testify, that the tax returns at long last must be turned over for a legitimate investigation by the state in terms of hush money that he paid and how he treated it in his tax returns. There's plenty of evidence to suggest that he cheats on his taxes. Just ask David K. Johnston and probably many, many others who've looked into this.
Yeah.
So I think it's been a good week for justice and the rule of law, and a very bad week for Trump and all of his colleagues, who must be starting to think, maybe now is the time for me to go in and start testifying to get a good deal.
Yep.
Maybe I have to tell the truth and get myself busy.
Real quick, one assumes that Roger Stone's stomach will calm down. And Politico reporter said jurors are being told this case has something to do with Trump. We expect some testimony, at least on the Roger Stone front, about a conversation that took place with Rick Gates and somebody on the phone in the back of a limo with then-candidate Trump, where he was told in advance about the planned release of some of these Clinton or Democratic emails.
Right.
I guess we could have expected a circus on the first day of his trial, but once again, I think justice will prevail, don't you?
I think it will. It was certainly a strange first day with someone having a seizure in the courtroom and the defendant absenting himself for the day because of alleged food poisoning. I don't know. Has he showed up this morning?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's mighty strange. I had a wonderful Jill's pin yesterday that a person had made and sent to me of Roger Stone's face with a zipper over his mouth, and hopefully he will at least abide by the court rules to not talk outside the courtroom. But yeah, his case is going to be interesting. Perjury of this sort is always hard to prove, but I trust that there is more than ample evidence, and I'm looking forward to it unfolding as it's presented.
You know what I'm looking forward to unfolding? Watergate Girl, the Jill Wine-Banks book.
Well, you're the one who named me that girl, so it sort of seemed natural to call it the Watergate Girl.
Yeah.
Can't wait, Jill. We're running so long. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you for calling.
Okay. Bye.
Oh.
So cute.